Well, hello everyone. Thanks for joining me. This is RPG with DBJ, and today's is Tuesday. So today's topic is I hope it's easy enough to read in the title. And I came by this a little hesitantly, but the idea is, after listening to some videos yesterday, is the 9-point alignment system that has pretty much faded away in 5th edition. Could it be replaced by Magic the Gathering's 5-point color wheel, the 5-point mana system, and other things, of course, as well? So for a little bit of a history lesson, just to get people caught up, Dungeons and Dragons has during the middle portion of its lifetime had a 9-point alignment system. So through one direction, you had the first portion of your alignment, which is like lawful, neutral, or chaotic. And then you had the secondary portion of your alignment, which went in another direction in a grid, which was good, neutral, or evil. And universally, it was used as a method to generalize the way your character and other beings had an outlook on the world. So if you were lawful, you were very traditional, or you followed the law. If you were neutral, you were kind of in the middle. You judged things based on the situation. And then if you were chaotic, you didn't like to follow rules and that kind of thing. All right. So, and then on the secondary portion of it, of course, it meant, were you a good person? Were you neutral and maybe a little bit selfish? And then the evil part, were you evil or conniving or whatever? What's up, Jared, Vince? Thanks for joining me. Yeah, this isn't specifically a dissertation. I don't want this to be a dissertation on the merits of or against or something like that, because you guys already know my opinion about alignment. I'm an extreme moderate. I guess Zen would be the way to do it. Like, I've never had a problem with it. I always feel like the problem's with people, not with the system. But after listening to some, I think it was a podcast yesterday and some videos or whatever. Yeah, Scott posed in the middle of the night. Yeah, dude. For those who don't know, that Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons are all owned by WotC, which is all owned by Hasbro, and they are more or less merging the fictionalized worlds of Magic the Gathering in our like it belongs to me, in the role-playing community, because they are coming out with a book. I believe it is the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. Now, for something else that you may not know, for free in the Unearthed Arcana, you can digitally download examples of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons using the fictionalized backgrounds and planes in Magic the Gathering to bring it into our role-playing setting. Ravnica will be one of their biggest books available, though the other ones are between, I don't know, maybe 10 to 20 pages long, and just give you examples of how to reskin things, change things, give you some background. But the color wheel, Vincent says, I'm still not sure about alignment. To be honest, it can have some boons, but they are minimal at best. Well, and like I said, its heyday existed in the middle portion of its life. Now 5th edition pretty much has alignment as a throwback. It doesn't have any game effect as it did in its middle part of its life, as far as like wielding certain weapons. There were certain magics that could or couldn't be used by certain alignments. There were some penalties for characters who acted outside their alignment. Now it's just a flavor tool, and not much else. Jared says, people love to systemize the alignment system. It's a pretty messy poop fight to manage these days. Vince says they want to use the MtG colors as alignment. Aren't you able to mix them in the game? Well, you can use anything you want. My suggestion, but I'm wondering whether it is a useful tool anyway. The reason being is because in both Ravnica, which is a setting in which the entire world is covered by a medieval city, and um, and the fact that they have guilds in it, factions and whatnot, that the colors are not just related to magic, but also positions, philosophy, political maneuverings, political fanaticism in many ways, and that kind of thing. And there that it is generalized enough that some people may want to use that to build their communities or cities or settings, and also kind of bring a little bit of those elements into the role playing portion of it if they play Magic the Gathering, or they used to play Magic the Gathering, but they want to bring the cards in and some of the flavor in, and how to mix the two. Jared says the MTG colors are all evil, though. If you look into the lore, that's the cool thing, because that's based on the eye of the beholder. Nobody thinks they're evil. Everyone thinks everybody else is. But hell yeah, they're pretty. Many of the color spectrum motivations tend to be quite sinister if you based on how you can twist it. Prue says the Dominaria free supplement just came out July 31st, by the way. Yeah, there's I don't have offhand. I guess I could look up the list of the ones that are available. What's it called? I guess I'm not going to do that. Vince says they tried really hard to make them all ambivalent as best, and in many ways, the use of the colors means that there's no bad guy, like as opposed to the alignment system, where if you tend towards evil or chaos, that you are considered to be opposed to society and the group and the people you're playing with, as opposed to being part of a guild or a faction, or having a political outlook that you could be at odds with someone, but not necessarily behind the eight ball. It's not a direct one-on-one relationship. And I think the real key to that, and I know I'm coming at this from an odd angle, is the fact that there's 5 colors as opposed to a 4-point system, because they could have very easily done like black, white, red, and blue, and it would have made it extremely binary. And although alignment has 9 points on it, the alignment chart is rather binary. Like there's a specific opposition created, as opposed to the 5-point system, which does have an opposition, but it is, because it's an odd number with the 5 points, you also have like the 2 opposites and then the 2 friendly colors next to it, and then it just runs around in a circle. Let's see. Vince says, a most played character was true neutral, and I played it in a way that he did not care for his alignment stuff at all. He was a crafter and sold to everyone. He did some good and some bad. Yeah. I've never understood why people thought alignment was a straitjacket, because it's always said that it is a generalization. It's like you make a character, make a personality, and then you just pick an alignment that most represents them, because everyone who's lawful good isn't the same. It's just like a whole society of, neutral evil people aren't exactly the same. Poo says Battle for Zendikar, Innistrad, Amonkhet, Ixalan, and now Dominaria, I think. And then Ravnica was a special. Yeah, those, the Zendikar, Battle for Zendikar, Innistrad, Amonkhet, Ixalan, and Dominaria are for free on WotC's website. and you can pick those up. I mean, you could just go ahead and download those, of which I've done, and it just gives you examples of how they do it. And Ravnica comes out at a time when they're also doing the Waterdeep heist, or Waterdeep Dragon heist, which is also a city-based adventure, and Eberron, which is also has a major portion of Eberron takes place in a city, especially like the city of Sharn or city of Towers or what have you. And so in general, it's like how to adventure in a city, having factions, having consequences to your actions, and not being motivated by alignment, but being motivated or being pulled and tugged by your relationship with factions that you are aligned with or against, or living in a way where you don't have any loyalty to any faction, and how even by not picking a side, you are in opposition to others. Like, you know, if you're not my friend, you're my enemy. This says for alignment, for me, alignment feels like a restriction mostly. Most of the times it comes up when you act against your alignment or try to argue with it. But that's why my character would, you know, and of course in quotes, but that's what my character would do. He is X, right? And but again, the act of doing that has nothing to do with alignment. That the act of doing that is someone who's just trying to be trying to use and or abuse or bully or spotlight themselves or rationalize something away. Alignment doesn't, there's no rule in there that says, well, I'm doing X. What happens is people are trying to gamify something that in the past had a gaming mechanic to it, and instead of being organic and moving forward, people like to stop the action to whether it's rationalizing bad behavior or rationalizing a method of not working with other people, or any other kinds of rationalizations, which is why alignment has faded away. People have started to use it as a, they have a nail, they want to use something as a hammer to solve that problem. People feel that way, that alignment has always been a restriction because of the actions of those around them. It's not the, it's if everyone's picking up wrenches and using them as hammers, it doesn't mean the wrench is a bad tool. It means it's not being used in a proper manner. Again, it's the difference between using something that makes sense and using that as a method to ruin other people's fun, versus, you know, shrugability, which is what I think it is. It's just, you know, what it's something. I guess I've been playing too long to have something as simple as that ruin the things I want to engage in. Hey, Jared says they have a hammer in their hand. They see everything as a nail. Yeah, Bruce says, I have to go now, unfortunately. I like talking about alignment and MtG colors, even if I don't really spend a lot of energy on it in my games. I get why some people like to use the MtG color chart. Yeah, Scott says, I've been playing AD&D, and no DM made a big deal about alignment, maybe somewhat with paladins, but it's more of an academic argument than one I see at the table. And that's usually what ends up happening, right? It's like, oh, let's stop the actual action and fun we're doing to have a philosophical or moral or ethical debate about, I don't know, killing orc babies or something like that. And it's just like, oh, it's just eye rolling. It's, you know, just move past it. But getting to the colors, there is Magic the Gathering has 5 colors, and it's black, white, red, blue, and green. And usually people consider the colors or refer to the colors in terms of magic, right? So black would be necrotic or shadowy. White would be protective and light and blessing, defensive. Green is life and growth or overgrowth, etc. Blue is like the mind and the air and storms. Invisibility, not really storms, but more like winds, and so on and so forth. But they also are some kind of an emotional, they have an emotional context to them. So black is like depression, sadness, despair. Um, White is hopefulness and care and love. Red is like passion and anger and rage. Um, Green is more zen, tranquil, etc. And so, and because even the color red is not fire, red is like blood and anger and storms and those kind of things. And so therefore, by combining two colors, three is you could got to get a little bit out there, but combining two colors, they were able in Ravnica to make these different guilds. For example, if you combine red and white, red is like passion and war and blood, and white is like defending or honor. You can come up with like a fanatical warrior caste knighthood, as opposed to say combining like black and blue, where blue is so cerebral and black is shadowy. You can have things like a shadowy organization or something like that. They've even colored ninjas into blue and colored ninjas into blue and black and whatnot. So there are like 10 guilds in Ravnica, and they correspond to combining two Magic the Gathering colors together. And then those using the two colors enables you to think of what their motivation is. So like black and green is life, black is necrotic. So it has to deal with like mold and fungus and rebirth and the cycles of death, you know, coming back to life and using that. There's so many other combinations. White and blue is more, I guess, would be the closest thing related to lawful neutral as an alignment of supporting a legal system in a very pragmatic kind of way. So anyway, it was suggested that some people have instituted using the color spectrum, the color wheel, in place of alignment, so that a player character can pick two colors, and that's kind of their general outlook on life, their way of their personality, their focus. You know, maybe that they are, I don't know, chaotic neutral or something. But so instead of picking chaotic neutral, they pick maybe red and black, and that kind of is their outlook. I think it's interesting. I neither love it nor hate it. I don't have a problem with it. I think anything that enhances the gaming experience is cool for me. Yeah, but you know, like Jared says, sorry. Scott Goat says, how about the vampire system of nature and demeanor? My nature is chaotic evil, but my demeanor is lawful neutral. I really do enjoy the nature and demeanor version of a Vampire the Masquerade, where you use a word descriptor, and they actually have a mechanic to it. But anyway, there's a word descriptor like caregiver or bon vivant, judge, you know, rebel, and you picked one as your nature and one as your demeanor. So your nature was what you truly were inside, and then your demeanor was how you presented yourself to the outside. And you can mix and match those, maybe 15 to 20. It's grown to like into the 40s or something, but at the beginning game, there were maybe 15 to 20 descriptors, and if you acted in accordance with them, you would regain willpower, which allowed you to get like successes and things. And so, like, if you were a caregiver, if you helped someone, and you could be a very evil person, say, as a caregiver, but if you helped someone, you would gain willpower. Or if you were a judge, if you I think if you predicted someone's success or failure and then they succeeded or failed, you could gain willpower. I think if you were a rebel, if you actively went against society's rules or something, you would gain willpower, and that kind of thing. And I believe your nature couldn't change very often, but your demeanor could, because that's how you presented yourself to the world, or you wanted people to perceive you as. And of course, that portion of it wasn't very gamified. It was very more like, yeah, just pick it and go with it, and you're done. And I really did it. I really did like that. Um, Vince says, while it's more community and power in numbers and stuff, it's not really good or love as far as I know. I think he's just talking about third edition as far as paladins being lawful good only, clerics one step away from the deities, monks are any lawful, barbarians are any chaotic. Yeah, they kind of even with those restrictions, most people ignored it because just being alive and being in our society, there's always a rationalization why someone would be a martial artist and be chaotic, or a druid would be evil or something like that. I don't know much about Burning Wheel. And Vince says, in Burning Wheel, you describe your goals, instincts, and traits. I think those are much more practical to use than something like alignment. Is, in my opinion, it's not as abstract. It also gives a really, from what I don't own Burning Wheel, but from what I understand and the exposure I've had to it, it also gives a great motivating force. So it pushes, it's like a descriptor that pushes the player characters forward, which is why I really like personalities and, under the backgrounds, like the personalities, the traits, the flaws, the ideals. I think those are far better uses in general. Hey, Darius, what's going on here, man? Scott Post says, hang on to that humanity, not too much. Yeah, in Masquerade, you had to maintain your poise over your vampire power. If you lose too much control, you turn into a very feral vampire, which was the motivating force to act within your nature and demeanor. It held off your losses in humanity, at least in the beginning game. Yeah, they had different rules for humanity. They had other like paths you could follow, but in many ways it was to hold on to who or what you were, based on the type of vampire you wanted to be. And so acting there was nothing forcing you to make a decision, but you did get a gaming benefit by acting in accordance with the things you picked for yourself, which I never understood. Like, why would you pick, like in the alignment issue, like why would you pick an alignment you didn't want to act in accordance with? Like, why would it be restrictive? It's like, I never understood that. Path of Gehenna, baby. Yeah. Jen says, I like the idea that players can have a role-playing goal that they can be rewarded with, which is sort of what a paladin is aimed towards. And he also says, like, what's the point of being X alignment? There needs to be a very good reason other than because my sheet says so. Yeah, I'm very much in accordance with things that push you forward, or in accordance with things that outside forces are pushing you towards something, or you have an inner motivation. So outside forces would be like factions, right? So let's say you're in a city that has like the guild faction. There's a guild for like merchants, and there's a faction that supports the nobility, and there's a faction, I don't know, of assassins, and there's a faction of knights or something. And I like the fact that that, as unfair as it may be, that if you don't pick a side, most people were like, hey, if you're not my friend, you're my enemy. And those kind of motivations aren't necessarily like what your personality is or what have you, but it's more of like, there is no right answer. It's like, hey, if I pick these individuals to be my allies, then the people opposed to my allies are now my enemies, even though my allies, I may not like what they're doing, but I have to pick the lesser of two evils. And in that manner, picking the lesser of two evils is probably, it's like it's the thing that will guide what your player character feels. Darius says a nice one was the fate systems aspects. It was mostly a backstory tool, but it really opened up morals to being a present choice that the group builds together. Yes, and fate is another one of those games where RP Gamer brought up to me a little bit earlier. We were, I don't want to diverge too much, but it was a little bit of clickbaity thing about you know, defining what is a role-playing game and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, I think sometimes we tend to want to, because the majority of us are intellectuals, we love to rationalize things, we love to organize things, we love to break things down into component parts to make it easy to digest, maybe make it easy to explain to other people. But unfortunately, for me, as a person who's very zen about most of his life, is like he, defining something puts it in a box and makes it, gives it a limitation. And sometimes things just are. Air just is. And yes, someone can say, like, you know, we all know tomatoes are fruits, but we put it in the vegetable aisle because it just is. That's what we've accepted. You could argue the point that tomatoes shouldn't be in the vegetable aisle, but we put it on salads. We just prefer it that way. And sometimes things just are. And arguing the point sometimes goes down a very narrow path. The chips and give and take mechanism in the game also allows the group to sensibly barter on morals. I'm thinking he's talking about a dungeon world in which you could only be chaotic, good, or evil, etc. And this gives you something concrete to role play. For example, an evil fighter must kill something innocent, and when they do, they get 1 XP. And sometimes it can be a very, as Vincent said that, but sometimes it can be very difficult to mechanize ethics and morality, because what happens is there are people who are gamist. They are individuals who are like, okay, what's the cost effect analysis of gaining a benefit from performing a particular action, and then there are those who take that to an extreme. Like for in that example that Vincent says about if you kill something innocent, they get 1 XP. There are some players who are like, okay, what's the maximum number of innocents I can kill to get the maximum benefit of experience out of it, without engaging in the setting or the without engaging in the world and having it make sense. Yeah, you guys. Business says usually you don't make things easy at first. It's the people who use it to make who tend to make things simpler. And RP says, yeah, that discussion is video in itself. Yeah. I think sometimes when by rationalizing things too much, you take away the majesty of what it is, where it doesn't need a description. For example, sunrise or sunset. Like, we know the sun doesn't set. We understand that the earth spins and its colors going through the atmosphere, and clouds are just like, you know, moisture and gravity, and it doesn't matter. A sunrise or a sunset is because it is, and it has a beauty and a majesty to it that even poets have been hard pressed to describe to someone who cannot experience a sunrise or a sunset. But breaking it down to its scientific components, because we want to understand what a sunset is, diminishes the majesty of a sunset. So oftentimes I think when people are designing a game, they are looking at the majesty of it, and unfortunately you're handing it off to people who may want to see it for its component parts and not see it for the holistic element of what it is intended to be, because the mechanism is portraying something that doesn't correspond to it. boo, boo, boo. Oh, Vincent says they only get 1 XP per session for alignment. Yeah, but I can see someone trying to abuse it. The first NPC that the first fetch quest NPC that comes up to the party and a player wants to kill it. I can see people abusing a number of things. But yeah, Vincent says you can't abuse it too much. I had a player trying to abuse it. Exactly what I was thinking. Living a Dice says at the end of the day, alignment can work as long as a system or the whole the DM sees it is agreed upon and player buy-in. Otherwise, it's a cluster headache of a philosophy debate, and that's exactly where I feel. Darius says yes. Apologies, talking about the dungeon system or dungeon world. Vincent says, and once he killed an animal he was riding wanting to get the XP, but he got what he deserved for that. Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, trying to, and it's unfortunate too, because most of the time the combat systems in games are the largest, because you can the morality of it is pretty ephemeral. Like you just, you hit something or you don't, you either hit or miss, and then there are physical effects. Whereas trying to create mechanisms for moral decisions can become there's infinite possibilities and circumstances. Watch any post-apocalyptic movie or read a book or see a TV show or video or something, and you have individuals. A Game of Thrones is another example of individuals living with their circumstances and trying to mechanize that. You end up bumping up against things where people go, well, yeah, but in this situation, my character wouldn't make that decision. It's like the lawful person stealing bread, why, the argument that some people will say, well, if you're lawful good, you would never steal bread. Yet the player character is like, yes, I'm lawful good, but the rules in this particular town are oppressive and evil. Me stealing bread isn't an evil act. I am breaking the law, but it is an unjust law. Therefore, and then you get in the whole thing and then everyone wants to stop the game and argue over, it's just like, whatever, just let it happen. When in doubt, role play it out. Like, God damn. Anyway, Vincent says, sometimes it feels to me like the Paladin is for those people who think that the alignment system is not strict enough and want more rules, or at least the designers seem to think that. And yeah, it's like my comparison to the color wheel for Magic the Gathering, because of the factions, which was my real point. I wasn't trying to argue the merits of alignment. I was arguing the merits of the 5-point color system, in opposition to the antiquated alignment system, which I could care less whether it disappears. Like whatever. I don't think I've never thought it was a bad system, but I understand everybody else thinks it is, so I care less whether it disappears or not. Like my feelings aren't hurt about it. I'm just saying that a very simple codified system that some people may want to incorporate in their game, I think would make a lot of sense, especially with Ravnica becoming a release, because the factions are based on that. Now, from what I understand, they specifically are not going to refer to colors at all for the role-playing book, but we know where it came from, and it may be a good way for people who want to use Ravnica, but they don't want to use that world to create factions and such. Yeah, Scott says, man, Paladins got the restriction when they were imbalanced in power, which I think was a very early method of trying to put a limitation on Paladins, because in AD&D they were far more powerful than the rest of the other classes. But anyway, Paladins, in my experience, tend to be better role players. I guess I get lucky, though. Vince says, I once wrote an archetype for the Paladin called Oath of the Broken Crown, which was focused on destroying tyrants, though morally ambiguous means. I like that. Yeah, some people luck up with really great players, and you don't see that, the clusterfuckery that happens with some players that try to abuse things in any manner, or sometimes abuse other players or DMs. Like it's not them breaking the rules, it's them trying to break you, and they're just rationalizing their breakage using the game and whatnot. Live and Let Dice says the player makes or breaks the class, then I guess. Yeah. Your paladin should have a list of rules to follow as opposed to simply acting in a lawful good manner. I think I think we appreciate the fact that pretty much every class or every individual has a set of rules they follow, including people who don't follow rules, because in effect, that is a rule that they've imposed on themselves. Each individual, no matter how wild or strange or, hey, I want to do whatever I want, is acting in accordance with an internal, they have their own internal ethics code. And so, a person who says, well, I don't want to pick an alignment because I want to do whatever I want, it in effect is picking a code, and that is their code. So when other people approach them and say, hey, I want to pick the most loyal individuals, they can look at that individual and go, well, I don't consider you to be loyal because you've chosen to do whatever benefits you at any moment, go away. It's yeah. Anyway, Infinite Roleplay says, I played with someone whose character was a paladin who got pissed when Orc Barbarians didn't honor his request to parlay. Hey, you could do it. When in doubt, role play it out. Hey, I want to have honorable battle. Orcs say no. Deal with it. Like, just you leave it in the game. I understand people want to stop the game and argue the whole thing. I just I think it's a waste of energy when you step out of the immersion to argue a fact that you could easily, I don't want to say solve, you can easily generate greater memories and stories and drama if you leave it in the game, which is pretty much how Game of Thrones has become its own thing. It's a sea of personal ethics bumping up against each other, and the end results of that. I really had alignment lawyers with clerics trying to be neutral as I do whatever I want alignment. Everybody tries to do the rationalized, like, hey, if I recoat this thing to make this as a way for me to get away with something, it's people taking the intended mechanism, the what I suggested before, the majesty of it, and rationalizing it down. It's like the individuals, it's the law shows where the act of being guilty or innocent doesn't matter anymore. It's the merits of the law that matter, and how that legal shows are still popular because the merits of the legalities always clash against the organic nature of society, and that guilt or innocence has nothing to do with it. It is arguing the merits of the actions. A killer, the purpose of a killer going to jail isn't a matter of guilt or innocence when, let's say, a police officer or detectives do not handle the evidence properly, right? We're not arguing whether the killer killed someone. We're arguing the merits of, did someone follow proper procedures, and therefore maybe the killer goes free, even though on the outside the civilians are like, wait a minute, I thought we were supposed to argue one thing over the other. Rules lawyering is micromanaging the merits of an action. Yeah. Neutral is either for those who actually want to maintain neutrality, which is hard, or those who don't think there are any easy answers. True neutral characters are mostly philosophic in nature. And see, again, I could see people playing it that way, or you could play someone who hasn't made a decision yet. Which is like, alignments don't necessarily have to be a philosophy. It could be someone on the way towards a way of thinking because I like to play characters who like to grow, and so they often say commoners are true neutral, and that may be a matter of their circumstance. Like, hey, I just want to keep my head down. I'm not trying to align with anyone. I just want to live my life until pushed to the point where um, they are motivated. And I think sometimes people try to make characters that don't have a motivation. They're not pushed towards a goal. And I think that's the hard, besides picking an alignment, I think that's the greater harm. It's like if you're going to play someone that isn't moving forward into the action, into drama, into adventure, then like, why are you playing? Hey, I want to play neutral because I don't want to make decisions. Like, whatever. Scott Poe says that a DM should enforce the oath. I think, Vince, my oaths would include things like poverty or helping townsfolk in a mundane way or coercing the party to help. Little inconveniences are good RP, and I agree with that. Especially self-imposed, right? Like if the DM has to enforce something, then I think the player is not. It has a disconnect with what is going on. And I think before play continues, maybe that player needs to have a talking with, like, look, either you're part of the game and you want to play a paladin who has oaths and it has responsibilities, or you don't, or you just want you're trying to get the benefit without the penalties, in which case you're not agreeing with the rest of us. Living Like Dice says, or lazy in nature and want an excuse to buck the entire system. My experience, I've only met one bad lawful stupid type. Yeah, we've all met lawful stupids and chaotic crazies and all that kind of stuff. Fence sitters are also neutral. Yeah, it says if you haven't made a decision yet, you should have the alignment with family or community. I think most normal people are lawful neutral if they live in a community. True, and I think you could make the argument that maybe most people are neutral good. Like, I don't want to harm anyone. If given the opportunity, sure, I'll share some of my bread and help out in the community, I think, or follow laws when I think it's appropriate. It's like speeding. Like, there are plenty of people who speed. They break the law all the time. Does that make them evil or something, or do they have some greater goal in mind? No, they just want to get somewhere fast, and there's no one around, and speed limit's kind of slow, and I don't see any kids in the street. I don't care if I speed, but I mean, there's no greater agenda of my intention is to buck the law and the system, and I'm going to get other people to help me speed with them or something. Sometimes people just do things because they do it without a greater goal in mind, because not every evil person wants to take over the world, right? Some evil people just want to scratch DVDs or tie people's shoelaces together or spit in their food, and not much more than that. Vin says you could play lawful good in a great way. Lawful stupid is mostly a meme at this point, even though it has some truth behind it, but that's mostly because of the players trying to abuse it. Yep. And Infinite Roleplay says also, I think people fail to see that morality doesn't always play into action. You could be lawful good, but be driven to murder by grief. It doesn't change your morality. Right. And in many ways, the lawful good person that performs an evil act, it isn't a matter of them changing or violating their alignment. It is more like pushed to do something. The end result is based on their alignment. A lawful good person would feel very guilty, maybe turn themselves in or try to make amends for the things that they've done. The evil person that commits the same crime or murder or something may not feel any guilt at all. Or the lawful good person may lead the rest of their life feeling guilty about it. Think about Peter Parker, Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. He thought he was this good kid. He lets this guy go who steals money and feels like that's a just thing. I think that evens the balance. And then this guy goes and kills his uncle, and then he's motivated from then on. You could. I'm sure in that sense, when Spider-Man was a role-playing character and decided to let this criminal go, I'm sure they stopped play for 45 minutes as they argued the fact that he picked, I don't know, neutral good as his alignment or something like that, right? And I'm sure that they had plenty of your alignment is this, you're acting wrong, blah blah blah, whatever. It's just stupid. Vince says, I personally think that if there is an aspect of the game which is for a character internally, it doesn't matter at all. If it doesn't affect your actions, it might as well not be there. In many ways, like, you know, fifth edition has tried to incorporate a little bit of the indie game nature of like having flaws and ideals and you know, personality and bonds and such, because there are some games that, you know, your inner monologue, your soliloquy, your internal motivations, when expressed in the game, let's say you're sitting around the fire and you're talking or something, like the game Within the Ring of Fire actually has a mechanic for the soliloquy, which is a storytelling element, but you can get a mechanical benefit for it, which is in fifth editions, you can get inspiration. In Fate, maybe you can get, you know, you can get a Benny, a Fate point for it. Some games or some tables even give you allow some sort of boon, like maybe a D6 or a D4 or something to add to any one roll, based on the fact that you are role playing your character, and then adding some kind of mechanical benefit to engage in what's going on, to sit back and have your character guilty and grief stricken because of all the enemies he had to kill, or the, you know, going through the not making light of, you know, PTSD of a major battle or something like that. Sure, there's no action happening. It's like happening in the mind of the person. But I've seen tables where they do that. I would do that if somebody was really, really wanted to engage in some kind of like emotional, distraught kind of thing. I would gamify that, because that to me is investment in the game, as opposed to stopping the play to argue some kind of crap, or my, you know, this is why my lawful and good character performed this action, and now I'm living with the consequences. Yeah, it's a Infinite Probe say he is neutral good because he's a vigilante, which is unlawful. Yeah, I would say I can agree with that. I suppose if someone had a different outlook on it, I might agree. You know, it's the idea of is Batman lawful, or is he chaotic, and whatever. It's like it is, and then trying to codify it isn't the issue. Sometimes things just are, and we don't need the answer for it. We don't need to shave off the pointy ends and round it out and stick it in a box and cover it up. Sometimes things just are. Vince says the thing is simply that there shouldn't be something that only one player can appreciate, and it does not really support the whole group. If you want to motivate yourself, you can write a backstory. Yeah, and that's the issue, right? Like I think if someone if you're not engaged with the people around you, like sometimes like I will, like I've played characters where I will be motivated because of the actions of the people around me. Like I played a character, we were going through the desert, and my character was annoyed. We made some die rolls, and I failed my die rolls to, you know, avoid dehydration. And this other player character, their character had like a high constitution, and they made a bunch of rolls and rolled a 20 or whatever. And so I role played it out that, you know, I noticed that I was being affected by something and they weren't. I was a little bit jealous. So my actions dictated the fact that it wasn't I was evil. It was just that my actions were dictating, like, oh, this person thinks he's all that, and playing it kind of childish, right? Like, oh, I'm just jealous of this person, so I'm going to act out and be pissed off and pout and stuff like that. And in the beginning, they were just like, "What are you doing?" And like, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "No, I'm role playing the die rolls. Like the die rolls said I failed and you succeeded to such an extreme extent that I felt like my player character would notice it and react to it, and then just let it happen. You know, let it go." Vince says, "Yeah, make mechanics to create connections between the characters, much more important than having internal struggle or whatever. I think you can do it if it incorporates what's happening around you. So, maybe the good and just character is reacting to what another player character has done, which gives credence to the actions of the other player characters around them, as opposed to being separate and internal and not reacting to what other people are doing. So, for example, if the evil character sacrificed themselves to help the good character, maybe the good character's like, wow, I thought about killing that guy, but he actually stood up and sacrificed and put himself in harm for me. Maybe I'm rethinking what I feel about this individual, which maybe makes kind of spotlights. It's a way of spotlighting other player characters by your own actions, by saying, yes, I acknowledge what the other player characters are doing and incorporating their actions into internalizing them into your character. I think it's kind of like a thumbs up to somebody else, like a pat on the back, like, yeah, I see what you're doing, and I'm reacting to it. I think people could appreciate that. Some may not, could care less, but whatever. I think the biggest problem with alignment is the law part. Law can represent so many different things. Law of the state, law of the land, law of your church will all probably differ. I absolutely agree with that. I would say pick one and go for it, right? If someone is like, my lawful character will follow all the laws of wherever they're at, and then another person's like, no, I follow the laws of where I come from, I think they both are equal. And then role play it from there. Vince says, yeah, that's true. Even met some lawful characters who made their own rules they follow. There's a pirate's code. In many ways, pirates follow a code. It may be against society's codes, but they have their own code in many ways. So yeah, you could argue the merits of whether they're lawful or not, which I would struggle. But if pirates have a code, then that code is what they live by, whether they are with other pirates or within society. And that conflict is where the drama is. I'd say leave it on the table, leave it in the game. Just think of alignment as shorthand for how you think a character basically acts. It isn't a thing to restrict you or even a thing you mention to other players. It just informs you early on. Darius says, interesting question. How do you lot feel about other player characters being a certain way or committing acts that you could reflect poorly on yourself or the game flow and then at large? Should you be tarred with the same brush by association? And that's an issue, right? It's the assassin traveling with the paladin. It is like, does the paladin defend the actions of the assassin if that assassin helped them, but in society they're considered to be a criminal? Or does the assassin decide to follow some of the restrictions of the paladin because they know that they're in, it's better to have a cohesive group, right? In many ways, you've got players who are like, hey, I'm going to play the assassin and just be an a-hole in the group, despite the fact that there's somebody else who's playing a paladin, and not having that discussion up front about, the give and take. I've always made a comment like, hey, the best thing you can do as a player character is to have an argument and decide to lose. It's like, hey, yes, because you're playing a paladin. Yes, you're the backstabber. Yes, you're the throat slitter, the killer. You can choose not to do that. You can choose to do the fold your arms and grunt and go, fine, paladin, I'll do it your way this time, to go along with the group because, hey, there's other people. You're playing with other people. Being an assassin and paladin, yes, they can both be in the same game. It is the individuals that are playing that become either the a-hole or the rejuvenator. Darius says, at the moment, the discussion is exclusively an individual stance. So there's very little allowance given to discussion amongst the party at large to what is and isn't moral. It may be that maybe the people have never had a reason to question their morality until exposed to a larger world. There's also a chance that, like I said, I always say, leave it in the table, right? It's the, hey, my character thinks this way, and then they go out into the world and then they may have to change that. I always bring up zombie apocalypse, the post-apocalypse, nuclear war, World War III. You know, your old life, you had a moral stance and you're pretty concrete in it. Society crumbles. Do you remain that way, right? Do you, it's the idea, do you die an honorable man, or do you live sacrificing part of your morality? When is it appropriate to give part of your morality up? For example, do you, if you're trying to keep society alive in a zombie apocalypse, do you leave older people behind because they're slowing you down? Are children a smart idea to have at a certain time? Would you save a group of people who are handicapped or elderly, or do you incorporate them in the group because, hey, we're human beings, and whether we all live or die, I'm not giving up that portion of my of myself. I'm not going to devolve into choosing whether someone lives or die. We all live, and then, I mean, we all will support each other. We're not leaving people behind. And you have to make that choice, right? You know, Infinite even says morality isn't logical. It is a personal stance. And sure, you can have, even the idea of not having a moral code is a code in and amongst itself. You know, if you're that person who doesn't have a stance, and you're amongst a group of people who have divergent stances, they may look at you as being wishy-washy, like, or they may judge you differently than the person you are. So the person who is morally ambiguous after an apocalypse may be very they may be very adaptable, but the people they interact with may look at them like, you're heartless and careless, and you have no moral code, and I don't want to hang around you. And then a person who's very morally fluid might be like, I'm not neither crazy nor amoral. I'm just adapting to the world. So it's people can always paint you in the colors of how they view the world without you changing. It's just other people layering something on top of you and changing you about that moral ambiguity. Morality can be logical. It isn't always. Vince says that. And no, morality isn't logical, though morality and logic may come to a crossroads at times. Even look at how logic always plays a part in Star Trek with Spock and the Vulcans, right? It is the conflict of making logical choices or making moral choices, right? Extending resources. Let's say there are 10 people trapped in a cave. It's going to require 30 people to excavate them and put them in danger. The logical thing might be, well, let the 10 people die, right? We're not going to put 30 other people in danger to save 10 people. But the people around you may paint that decision as immoral, even though the people who are making the logical decision are like, well, we pulled our emotions out of it. We're not going to sacrifice 30 people to save 10. It doesn't make sense in a logical aspect. Whereas the morality of the situation might be, we're not going to let our people die. I want to be one of those 30 people that's going to volunteer to help these 10 people that are trapped or something. And that is where the conflict comes in, right? The Vulcans are like, we're not immoral. Like, we don't lack a morality. We just choose to follow a more logical path. And Ben says, where does this thought come from, Infinite? Because morality can be logical if you take the conventional meaning of both terms. Scott Post says, morality is subjective, which is why it's inconsistent. It's also part of human survival instinct as we operate best in groups. Finally, it's a luxury. It's because when you pick a moral path, circumstances can change to make you change that. For example, we in our world we've had some serious situations about, let's say, a plane gets hijacked and someone's flying a plane and we all know that this plane in the next 30 minutes is going to crash into a very public area, killing 10 times as many people. Who makes the decision to shoot the plane down, right? If your morality is, we one choice is we don't negotiate with terrorists. Another choice might be, we're going to do everything we can to save the innocent. And the conflict can come in that a good person may say, to save 10 times as many people, we're going to shoot down 200 passengers to save 2,000 or more. And another person may say that you are evil for even suggesting such a thing. And so someone's moral code can be greatly challenged by that because of the circumstances, as opposed to the subjectivity of it. And even someone who sticks to their guns, like, no, we don't negotiate with terrorists, we're going to shoot the plane down and we're going to save everybody, will be viewed that way differently before the action and then viewed differently after the action, even though that individual has never changed their own stance. You know what I mean? And again, you could argue whether that person's right or wrong or whatnot, but it becomes, you start to go down a rabbit hole, this spiral of yes but no, but yes but no, as opposed to leaving it in the game, making the decision, and then living with the consequences, which I think is the more or less why we have such problems with characters having certain moralities and getting past them, is because people don't want to live with the consequences of their actions, as opposed to making the decision in the first place. It's like, yeah, I want to be fluid because I want to make the choice that's going to cause me the least amount of harm, as opposed to, yeah, this is my moral code, I'm going to stick to it, and I'm going to live with the consequences of my decisions. Vincent says morals are often made from logic or experience. The problem usually comes in when they're taken to an extreme, get abused, or are not challenged or changed. Infinite says the shortest short answer I think can come up with is morality exists as a flow between emotion and logic. Vincent says, which could mean it can be logical. And again, the situation of hijacker takes over plane, wants to kill people. The logic of the situation may be shoot the plane down. But the challenge to the person who has to make that decision, or those that are involved in that decision, may bump up against a moral quandary, because in their head they're like, no, we're here to save people's lives. Like, our job is to save people's lives and defend people, and we're part of law enforcement or the military or what have you. And then these other individuals place them in a position of having to make a decision of, do you sacrifice 200 to save 2,000? And so, what's the other one? The train track situation. It's a train's coming down the track and it'll go through like a school or a mall or something, and you have the ability to switch the track. And if you switch the track, it's going to hit one single innocent person when you switch the track. Are you the individual that would pull the lever to make it switch the track? Now, if you don't pull the lever, you've taken no action, and it'll run into the school of hundreds of kids. But you have made no action, and is the act of not taking action you making a decision, or is the act of pulling the switching the track so it can hit one individual on the track making a decision? And you could play that out in all kinds of ways. I'd say that emotion often informs morals, but sometimes it's just values, and whether or not outcomes or behaviors are the primary determinants of what is moral. So I guess I can agree. It could be indefinite, or you're saying infinite. Infinite says, I think you're conflating though. He says it could be. Chat communication is tricky. Yeah, you only have you're limited by the ability to to use written language, which even speech is yeah, living at ice, text communications suck. Yeah, it really does. Even spoken language sucks because even the words we choose tend to put our thoughts into a box when we're probably thinking of something far more far wider. Emphasis says, though morality has been something debated for hundreds of years, and the trolley problem is the train. The trolley problem is the train tracks. The thing's name. Yeah, I can't. Is it a trolley problem? I can't remember, but it's you know some if you are the person standing at the trolley track and you do not pull the lever, others may look at you like you could have saved these kids, and so they've layered on top of you your moral decision, whereas you more morally might be like, I'm not making a decision to save someone's life or not. It's not up to me, right? In my field, they tried the trolley problem for real. It did not really work out too well, though. Most just did not realize they should do something. Well, there's a documentary about the scientists who did a study on people where they gave electric shocks to someone who had to answer questions, and the electric shocks ramped up higher and higher until it could kill the person. And they were told to, if the person got the answer wrong, to electrically shock them. And many of them just continued doing it because the person in authority overrode their own moral judgments, and some people supplanted their own morality with someone in a higher authority. And so, yes, morality can be fluid, especially when, higher moral judgments. It's like, okay, I have my own way of thinking, but these people above me are supposedly have a greater view of things. Maybe it's their view of the world might be bigger. So I'm going to supplant my own morality in place of those in authority who I may agree with their morality, or I may not even agree with their morality or even know it, but I'm trusting that they are not willing to violate my own morality in their actions. And he says, Infinite says, I watched something where they said, as the number of people grow in a situation, the chance of one taking action decreases as they expect someone else to take action. Infinite says, I watched that too, DBJ. I can't remember the name of it, but there is someone did the documentary on the real life study of people using the electric shocks and ramping electric shocks. And they could hear the person screaming and begging them to stop doing it. And the people just kept on going because the doctor or whoever with the clipboard was like, no, please continue. As a person, as opposed to the person standing up and telling you like, hell no, I'm not doing that, and walking out. Right. Scott says, going back to the nature demeanor thing, just because people feel a thing is moral or not doesn't mean they act accordingly. Most people are concerned on others' morals, not their own, which is also a thing as well. Some people consider the morality of others in their own situation. Maybe your moral code is, you know what, I'm not going to speak for somebody else. They can make their own decisions, and I'm not going to violate what they feel is good or not. Tesla Ranger says the Milgram experiment. It says, which is why L5R is kind of amazing. L5R is a perfect gamified example of the choices that people make in a fictionalized Japanese setting. Because I can't speak on real life, but it's like making the decisions in feudal Japan in this fictional setting. It's like, do I kill someone because I've been told to, but I decide not to? Do I kill myself instead because it goes against my code? Do I rationalize performing this evil act that I consider evil to take revenge? It's the 47 Ronin deal, right? They're these lawful and upstanding samurai that are ordered to slaughter innocent people, And they're like, no, we're supposed to defend them, but we're also supposed to follow the daimyo's orders, the shogun's orders. What do we do? Oh, well, we're going to rebel, but we broke the law. So after we take out this person, evil person, we're going to commit, seppuku or seppuku and kill ourselves, ritual suicide, right? It's that's where the 47 Ronin mythology, not mythology, where it has gone from a real life act to mythological proportions, because it is literally encompasses that that morality and that honor, and the two clashing together, and these individuals making the decision that, yes, I'm going to violate my oath to obey a rule to get rid of someone's rulership who is evil, and then pay for the act of me violating the rule in the first place. In which case, there was actually a farmer who was buried with the 47 Ronin, who disrespected the samurai, not knowing what the Ronin were doing, and then committed suicide in honor of them for not believing in them. And then that individual was then honored for performing that act to be buried with those samurai. Living at Dice says, I think the book called The Lucifer Principle is interesting as a tangent to this discussion if the Milgram experiment interests you. There's another movie called Unthinkable with Samuel L. Jackson, Carrie Ann Moss, and some other people about torturing an individual who has information about nuclear bombs and how far to go to extract the information from this individual. Should they go after his family and his kids? Should they threaten them because this individual is threatening other people? And yeah, it was a giant sized moral movie. It's not bad. The acting's good. The acting is excellent by the actor who I cannot remember, who basically is strapped in a chair the entire time. Infinite Roleplay says, Unthinkable, I watched it, was awesome. Yeah, Vincent says, real samurai did not really act on honor, but did what their master said they should do. They did multiple massacres in their history without questioning it. Yeah, that's why I said it fictionalized L5R, because I don't know much about, nor can I speak on feudal Japan and what they could or couldn't do. But in real life, Code of Bushido wasn't really honorable. Yeah, right. Someone tells you what to do and you do it. That's making a choice, right? You're choosing to follow the instructions of the people above you, and then the others can judge you on you making that decision. In many ways, it's like a soldier, right? You send the Green Beret out there and you say, hey, you need to perform this mission. And oh, by the way, those children out there, you might have to shoot them too to achieve your mission. Does that make the soldiers good or evil, right? From the point of view of various individuals, it will or will not, right? Oh my God, I know a little something about Bushido. Yeah. And if it says, yeah, Unthinkable is predictable but awesome. Yeah, but that might be another 2 hours talking. Yeah, Bushido and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, really, let me circle back and then have to end this because I really do have to get ready for work. Circling back about morality and codes and things, that the 5 colors of Magic the Gathering do have a kind of a code of behavior that's attached to them beside just the magic involved, whether it's about sacrifice of self or others or practicality or things like that. And I was just wondering, like, is that, or will that be, or could that be a replacement of sorts for alignment, and using that just as a choice, like, oh hey, we're going to use the 5 color thing in our games just because. Vincent, I personally think every choice which allows you to default a decision without questioning it cannot be moral. You should always be able to question what you do. Moral, honorable, not really kissing cousins though. Yeah, you could go back and forth with that. Like, hey, if somebody else tells me to do something and you're supplanting your own moral code, uh, is that a challenge to your own code? Maybe that's more of a psychological strength and or weakness of the individual. Although someone can choose, you could make the claim that a soldier is choosing to perform an action based on their superiors by purposefully supplanting their own moral code temporarily in a situation to then put that morality back on again, which is where um, psychological stresses, permanently or otherwise, come into effect. Right? You're instructing me to go and, you know, for good or bad, perform a mission that might involve killing women and children, and then I have to come back and be a moral individual who doesn't do those things, right? It's like, can I put it on and off? Many human beings cannot, maybe because their moral integrity is so deeply rooted in them that it is not easy to remove, even though they've tried to do so. Yeah. We all agree that morality exists despite its nebulous nature, which sort of settles the earlier question of whether alignment has a place in the game. I say it does. That's what Scott Poe says. Yeah, I think so too. And I think what we talk about, because of course, we're not at the table, we're not playing the game. What we're talking about, I think, is the kind of thing that unfortunately plays out slower, but absolutely has a place in the game, right? You play it out. The two knights that go in and want to slay the orc horde, and they find the orc babies and orc pregnant women, and one of them says, hey, they're evil, let's slay them, and the other one's like, no, there's a chance that they could be good, or it goes against my personal moral code to slay innocents and those who cannot defend themselves. Both are equally right, and then the consequences of that, whether it's an internal consequence, external, those things should be left in the game, as opposed to stopping the game, getting an argument, not playing with each other, blah blah blah. Um, um, Scott says, I can agree. I mean, Infinite says, Scott, I can agree with your stance, but a game that wished to quantify alignment or morality should take a specific approach and make that particular approach readily known, like L5R. And that's really the issue, right? Like if you didn't discuss it up front, that's the mistake, not not realizing this is part of the game, right? You got to bring that up. Like L5R specifically states up front that this is a game about those decisions, and many of them could be wrong. In the sense of you are acting outside the way most people are to act in this world, because it lets you know up front that if you want to play an L5R and you want to do whatever you want, um, and act in a way that you want to do whatever you want, you are in opposition to many of the other people who are trying to act within the strictures of the world and still try to get what they want by manipulating others and um their codes, as opposed to you running around being chaotic and whatnot and stuff. So yeah. But anyway, getting a little late. Got to get washed up, guys. Thank you very much. We could go on and on and on with this. Yeah. It we go really far with this kind of thing. I really, my intention really wasn't even to go there. I really just wanted to just talk about like Magic the Gathering and other crap like that. So, by the way, yesterday was the D20th. The D6 and the D20th, we always release a new adventure key, which can unlock the adventure in you. These are like 3 or 4 page adventures. You can go to, all the stuff is down in the doobly-doo. You can go to Drive Through RPG. We have one that's pay what you want. Essentially, it's free. Give you an example of what they are, and then we release them it's approximately every 2 weeks. Is the D6 and the D20th. D20 course got to release on the 20th because that's a critical hit right there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's well, anyway, it's a cute mnemonic. Uh, 2/3 of us thought it would be kind of cute, and the other third is just like, what the hell? Um, Darius says all roads lead to alignment arguments. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Anyway, so, yeah, unfortunately, it's like the it's a shame, but it is true. But yeah, there's always something new coming from us, meaning like Alex, Rob, and myself. So D60 20th, we're having we always have a new release. I'm always writing. Like right now, I'm like popping back and forth between battlefields, cityscapes, subterranean realms. Alex is working on abominations, liches, a book about creating, designing, and the backgrounds and doing everything with liches. Um, Shoot, there's always something new coming out from us, but always writing, and that's the thing. Maybe I should do I probably would do I should do an episode on how I write and create, maybe help some other people out there. I don't know how helpful that is because my mind is quite chaotic, but I've been able to harness it. So maybe I can help some other people who have a little bit of like not attention deficit, but like just very hard to focus on one thing for a long time. Tomorrow is I think I put it in the title thing. When this is over, I'll release it. Tomorrow we build spaceships. Yeah, if I let's see if I could I should be able to release it right now. Anyway, long story short, it's already up. We do Vince and I are doing an episode tomorrow about building and using spaceships in a game and having it's almost like it becomes a character in and of itself, very much like the Millennium Falcon is a character in a story, like Kit in Knight Rider, and those kind of things. Like those vehicles become characters. The Enterprise is a character in the story of Star Trek. Those kind of things. So we're going to talk about that and design one using his modification of the cipher system, which I think is actually quite excellent. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me. And of course, as always, myself and everyone else, just be positive, be creative, be majestic. I don't know why I like that word now, stuck in my head, but just understand that sometimes things just are, and we can distill things down into small boxes, but let's look at the larger image and just embrace its intent, whether even if we are unsure of what that intent is, to just have a more a greatly fulfilled life. Yep. See you guys. And yes, everyone, always be majestic. Thanks, guys. See you.